Welcome to the fourth course in the Futurist Thinking specialization. I am so glad to have you back for the Collaborative Foresight Skill Building course. Now, this is going to be the most fun of all the courses, I think, because this course is all about gaming out the future. Over the past decade, the Institute for the Future has pioneered a series of methods known as massively multiplayer foresight. And the reason why massively multiplayer foresight is so important is that you can never get a really good picture of the future if you're only looking at it from one point of view. You really need to look at it from massively many points of view. And that's why we use games to invite many people to the table to examine the future from their own perspective, their own values, their own goals. And when we invite many, many people to this game table together, we can really uncover surprising insights, new strategies, possibilities that we would never, ever, ever see on our own. So in this sequence, you're going to learn 5 different gaming techniques that you can use to build your collaborative foresight. I'm really excited to teach you these games, and I will see you in the next class where we will talk all about why the future is like a game. I want to share with you a mystery that I've been a little bit obsessed with for a very long time, and it's a mystery that I think I finally solved. So let me tell you about it and how I solved it. There's this quote that has been attributed to Albert Einstein, and the quote is, "Games are the most elevated form of investigation." And this quote shows up in a lot of different places, always attributed to Einstein, but nobody can seem to figure out exactly when he said it or what he meant by it. And I think it's a really mysterious and puzzling thing for Albert Einstein to have said, because Albert Einstein was a physicist, and you would think he would say that science is the most elevated form of investigation, or physics or math or something like that. It's kind of bizarre to think that he would have said that about games. But I've investigated this quote, and other people have been investigating it too, and there are some clues as to what he might have meant. It turns out that Albert Einstein was a very obsessed chess player. He played chess all the time. He wrote about chess. In fact, he wrote letters to friends lamenting that he felt like he was becoming addicted to chess, that he was thinking about it when he should have been thinking about his research. And this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. First, it shows that even someone like Einstein can worry that he's becoming too addicted to his favorite game. So when we look at the future of gaming, we can remember, looking back at the past, that games have always been super engaging, even for Nobel Prize winning scientists. But he also wrote about chess as this kind of problem that was being collaboratively solved by all of the players. And I think this is where we get our insight into why games might in fact be the most elevated form of investigation. So think about chess as a problem. It is a problem where you have a certain set of resources that you have to protect and maintain, and you can use them in different ways, and you have an opponent who is using their resources to achieve a goal that is opposite yours. And every time you sit down to play a game of chess, you have 2 people bringing 2 different strategies and ideas about how the resources might work, and you play out the game, and you have a series of hypotheses being tested. Did this play work? Did it not work? And at the end of the game, you've learned a little bit about the problem of chess. And maybe the next time you play it a little bit better. And think about how little we knew about the game of chess when people first started playing chess hundreds of years ago. The first people to play a game of chess, they were probably terrible at it. And now millions and hundreds of millions of people have played this game, and we've learned so much about it, and we've gotten so good at it that in early artificial intelligence research, the benchmark for are computers as smart as human beings became the ability to beat a human being at a game of chess. That's how much collectively we have learned as humanity about this very particular problem. We've had hundreds of millions of people bring their imagination and their creativity and their investigation to it. And we know so much about chess, which is really a very complicated problem space, if you run the math, it turns out, and maybe this is why Einstein was so interested in it, that there are actually more possible games of chess than there are atoms in the universe. You can run the math on this. I'll throw some numbers up on the screen. But there are literally more different possible ways from the starting game board that you could play out a game of chess than there are atoms that make up everything in the entire universe. So talk about a complex problem. No wonder you need hundreds of millions of minds attacking this problem together creatively and collaboratively. And this really speaks to why gaming has become such an important part of futures thinking, because the future really is like a game in a lot of key ways. For one thing, every move that you make changes what the future could be, right? Just like there are more versions of chess and ways it could play out than there are atoms in the universe, there are infinitely many futures, but every decision we make today, every move we make, just slightly changes that realm of possibility and moves the game or moves the future in a different direction. And the future is like a game because people are playing with different goals. Sometimes they're on the same team as you and you're moving towards the same objective. Sometimes they have a different objective and they're going to use strategies that work against your own. And you have to be able to really look at the entire space of people playing their own games and understand what their goals are and what their motivations are so that you can better anticipate their strategies and protect your own resources and your own goals while at least understanding what's motivating everybody else. And the most important reason that the future is like a game is that if we investigate it together, if we all bring our creativity to it collaboratively, we can really game out massively more of those possibilities. If I were to sit here and try to imagine all of the different ways the future of a particular technology might play out, I might have a few ideas, but if you come into the conversation and another player comes in and another player, and we can get thousands or tens of thousands or millions of people gaming out consequences together, then we're really going to fill in that potential game board of possibilities where we can discover things that would be impossible to discover alone. So that's why the future is like a game. And in the next video, we're going to talk about why it's so important that we invite everyone to play this game together. There aren't that many professionally trained futurists in the world. By completing this course on Coursera, you're actually becoming one of the very few on the planet. So thank you for increasing our numbers. There are, however, a lot of gamers on the planet. By last count, there were 2.6 billion people who spend on average an hour a day playing video games on their computer or on their phone. And a question that I've been really intrigued by is, what if we could get all 2.6 billion gamers to answer one or two questions about the future? What could we learn by bringing all of that strategy and imagination to a future question? And so I've been thinking, what one question would I ask people? What one future problem would I really want 2 or 3 billion people in the world to tackle with just a few minutes of their creativity? And I think I have the answer, and you're going to get to answer some of these questions yourself in just a few minutes. The problem I think we should all be tackling together is asteroids hitting the Earth, which is a pretty dramatic problem. I think it's kind of important to think about the problem of what would happen on our planet if we became aware of an asteroid heading towards impact. Now, I'm not the first person to think that this is an important future topic that we should tackle. There was actually a game run at a major global conference. The conference is called the Planetary Defense Conference, and it's held every couple of years for people around the world whose job it is, as a full-time job, to think about how to protect the planet Earth from things hitting it and destroying us. So they spend their whole lives thinking about asteroid detection and deflection, and its scientists and its engineers and its space experts and policymakers. And at the most recent conference, they decided to run a kind of collaborative simulation, a hypothetical game where they would try to game out the consequences of discovering an asteroid coming to the Earth. And let me tell you a little bit about how it worked so you can see how it was played. First of all, they built this really cool online tool that would allow you to adjust parameters of what might be detected in space. How big is this object? What material is it made out of? How fast is it moving? What angle of attack is it coming in? And depending on how you change the parameters, it would give you different results about where it might hit the Earth and the kind of force it might hit the Earth with. And so they had these trajectories that they would map out, and it would show this ring around the Earth that this comet or this asteroid might hit in this country, and it might, for this number of miles, it would shatter all the windows. This number of miles, it would be like a massive earthquake. This number of miles, it would be like a nuclear explosion. And you could map out the range of consequences. And they would also look at what would happen if it landed in water instead of landing on the Earth. And so water, you would have kind of tsunami effects, which would have a different kind of devastation that you would have to plan for and prepare. So they were playing out all these possibilities and zooming in different areas around the globe for where it might hit. And then they decided to run a very strategic thought experiment, which was for 5 days. They imagined that they had received a future forecast of an asteroid coming with a specific set of parameters and specific chances of impacting different parts of the Earth. And every day they updated the scenario, and they asked their 500 expert players, 500 people who were trained professionally in thinking about asteroid detection and deflection, what they would do and what they think other people would do. So on the first day of the game, the scenario was that scientists had determined that there was a 1% chance of an asteroid impacting in the year 2022. So this was a number of years in the future, and it was only a 1% chance. And so the experts thought, well, would we share this with the public? It's only 1% chance. Do they need to know? How many actions should we take? It seems like kind of far off. And they would sort of talk hypothetically about what they might do. On the second day of the game, they updated the scenario. Now it's a year later in the scenario, and scientists are predicting a 43% chance of impact. And they actually have a date now. They know the date. In the game, it's September 3rd, 2022. We believe 50-50 chance that the asteroid will hit the Earth, and here's the ring of potential impact. So now considerations change. That's a much higher probability, and you have a date that you could plan for and strategize. So the scientists continue to collaborate, and they're making PowerPoint decks with strategies and what they would do and having all-night meetings. Third day of the game, they update the scenario. Now it's a year further into the scenario, and they are 100% confident an asteroid is going to impact, and they continue to know the date, September 3rd, and they've got that ring of possibility of where it will hit. They continue to talk, and on the fourth day of the game, now it is the year 2022 in the game, there were only 5 days left until impact, and there's a 100% chance of impact. They know it's going to be 9:50 a.m., and they know it's going to hit primarily in the area of Bangladesh. So they move through these updating scenarios to try to figure out how much time would we need to make certain decisions and try to deflect it. If we can't deflect it, can we move people? Which governments should have to carry the burden, the economic consequences? Are we going to have a massive refugee crisis as people try to flee a country that has a 100% chance of impact that might have the force of a nuclear bomb? So they're playing out all of the social and economic and geopolitical consequences. And so you can actually go online. You can go to the Planetary Defense Conference's website, and you can see all their PowerPoints and see what they decided. And they definitely thought there would be a lot of geopolitical tension as countries tried to deflect the asteroid into somebody else's path. And it got very dramatic. And you can see what the experts thought, and I'll put a link in the course notes for this class. But that's just what 500 experts think might happen. And from my work at the Institute for the Future, I've come to realize that you can actually learn a lot more about the future, not just by asking experts, but by asking ordinary people what they would do in a given scenario. And we can see how that might play out right now by playing this game together. We're not experts in planetary defense, but we could think about what we might do if scientists announced that there was a certain probability of an asteroid landing with the potential force of a nuclear bomb in our city. So I want you to imagine now, you're being asked to play this game and to game out your own future. What would you do today if you were told by an international advisory board of scientists and global leaders that there is a 100% chance of a massive asteroid impact on Earth in the next 6 years, and 10% chance of it landing where you live with the force of a nuclear bomb? So you've got 6 years to plan, and it's only a 10% chance of landing where you are. And I want you to let the scenarios sink in a little bit and imagine, do you own a home? Would you sell it and move? Do you run a business? Would you think about relocating the business? Would you try to get involved with some kind of planning efforts to help other people make decisions? Would you advocate for massive deflection campaign to try to aim it somewhere else? What would your response be, and what would your individual decision making look like? Now you can update the scenario a little bit more. Maybe some people would choose to leave, some people would stay. Imagine that now you're in a scenario where there's a 100% chance of an asteroid impact in the next 5 days. It's coming. And there's a 100% chance of it landing where you live, only 5% chance of it landing with the force of a nuclear bomb. So maybe it'll be like an earthquake, maybe it'll be really disastrous. Only 5% chance of the worst case scenario. You've got 5 days. What do you do? Now, if your instinct is to leave, you can imagine other people's instinct might be the same. How do you evacuate safely? How do you get everyone out? Who might stay? Who might choose to stay? Why might some people stay? What should be done about the people who stay? What opportunities are there in staying? A lot of people have very different responses to this, and we'll open up a discussion board for people to kind of play out their futures and their scenarios. But these questions are not just hypotheticals, and they're not just relevant to the idea of an asteroid impact. They're actually very similar to real problems and real futures that people are grappling with today. For example, the potential impacts of climate change in areas around the world where people own homes and people run businesses, and there are forecasts that these areas might be unlivable or become uninhabitable over the next decade. For example, in the United States, in the southern part of Florida, we're starting to see a bifurcation of some investors think they need to sell everything, liquidate, because the real estate and the housing in the area will be worthless because of climate change coming soon. And other people are taking kind of a more, seems okay to me, we're going to try to ride it out approach. And you see this kind of divide between the visions of the future, the optimistic and also the sort of anxious visions of the future. You can also see this scenario being important, this kind of questioning being important to thinking about the future of health and the future of pandemics. And in fact, thinking about how people might adjust their behavior during a time of pandemic is something that this kind of questioning can shed some light on. And in fact, there was an example within a video game a number of years ago where a similar type of scenario played out, and it was so fascinating to researchers that the Center for Disease Control in the United States actually updated their policy for how to respond to real-life pandemics based on what gamers had done in a game. And this might be familiar to you if you followed video gaming at all. You can see here, this is a screenshot of an incident called the Corrupted Blood pandemic that happened in the World of Warcraft game, I think about a decade ago. And this was a bug in the game where the video game developers did not mean for this to happen, but a new feature, it wasn't quite programmed correctly, and it unleashed this kind of plague in the world that if you encountered it, it did a huge amount of damage very quickly. It spread very fast to anyone in the immediate environment. And so you had this kind of wasteland where every player was dying and it was spreading out of control, and the whole game looked like the worst apocalyptic pandemic you could ever encounter. And what was really interesting is the way that players behaved in this game ran counter to how scientists thought people should rationally behave in a pandemic. One thing that happened is people found it very interesting, and so they would actually go to areas that were already affected by this outbreak so they could see it for themselves, and they could report on it to other players. And these reporters became really powerful vectors for contagion. And this was something that researchers hadn't accounted before, that actually the desire for people to know more, for curiosity to be sated, for reporting and journalism on the outbreak, for that to actually become a vector for contagion. That wasn't in their models before, but actually in more recent years with the Ebola outbreaks, we saw exactly this happening and actually playing out in real life, that reporters became an important vector for bringing the disease into previously uncontaminated areas. So we learned from that one thing. We also learned that players were doing something really weird, which was they were trying to take advantage of the pandemic to loot other players' avatars, their deceased avatars, for things that they could use and get an advantage in the game. And this led to people taking more risks than necessary. Well, it turns out that in a time of pandemic or climate change or an asteroid potentially impacting the Earth, that there are a lot of people who will take bigger risks because they think if everybody else is leaving, we can stay and we can profit from that. And that actually becomes a tension or phenomenon that has to be managed, and it's a risk that has to be mitigated. So the CDC has factored that into their models now in times of pandemic. And it's just very interesting to see how a hypothetical scenario or a game with no real life consequences or stakes can actually yield to real insights about how we might deal with a similar problem in the future. Now, you're probably wondering, how reliable is it what people say they'll do in a game, a hypothetical scenario, and what they would actually do in real life? We've actually been lucky enough at the Institute for the Future to have one of our hypothetical scenarios play out in reality shortly after we ran a game, and we were able to track down the hypothetical scenario and what they would. Did you do what you said you would do in the game in real life? And in the next video, we'll tell you about that game, about that scenario. What would happen if the world ran out of energy? If our most reliable and commonly used energy source just disappeared? How would we survive and adapt? That was the question at the heart of the first ever truly massively multiplayer future forecasting game, a project called World Without Oil that was run for the first time in the year 2007. This was a game that was designed to help people look at their own lives and think about how they consume energy, how they use resources like oil, and what changes they might be able to make in their own lives to consume more responsibly and also be more resilient in the face of potential future energy crises. We invited people to play a future before they lived it to see if they could survive one of the more extreme scenarios that we could dream up. What we did is we created an online social network specifically for this game. We invited people to sign up and create a profile based on their real life identity. We didn't want you to play a fictional persona. We asked you, where do you really live? How old are you really? What do you do for a living? Do you have kids? What are the things that are most important to you? Because we wanted you to respond to the scenario with your real values and your real interests and your real life specifics. Because if there's one thing that you're an expert on, it's you. And we thought any forecast that you would make about your own future would be really potentially interesting and helpful, not just for you to think about, but for, at a higher level, if we collected enough of these individual stories and individual forecasts, that we could learn something about the community and how the community might respond. So you told us all of these details, and we would ship to you every day notifications about a fictional oil crisis. Depending on where you lived, you would have different problems you would encounter. We would say maybe airports are no longer functioning in your city because there's not enough fuel for airplanes to take off and land. Or we might tell you that buses are no longer running, public transportation, school buses. We might tell you that only 1 in 2 people are able to get enough fuel in their tanks to fuel their car to get to work. People are working from home. Maybe there's a food shortage issue because there's not enough fuel to get the trucks that deliver food from far away into your town. So you can really only consume food that's been locally grown. That's the only thing that's on the shelf. So we would give you these different bits of information, and then we would just ask you, please think about what you would do if you couldn't fill your tank to get to work, if your kids couldn't get bused to school, if half of your employees are now working from home because they can't get to the office, if you have to make dinner but you can't buy anything at the supermarket. What are you going to do? Who are you going to ask for help? And what strategies will you employ? And people were invited to use social media to create a kind of real-time collaborative documentary. People were making videos, they were posting photo series, they were keeping journals and blogs online. They were using every form of storytelling media to tell their own story. And they were going out into spaces and interviewing people who weren't technically playing the game, but asking them what they would do to kind of build our collective foresight even beyond the number of players. We had just over 1,000 players commit to living in this world for 6 weeks, and they continued to evolve their strategies and collaborate with each other and collaborate with other players living in the same part of the world. And we uncovered a tremendous diversity of ideas and responses. What was particularly interesting is that players formed these kind of smaller teams to investigate specific questions that they were really interested in, like the future of workplaces. What's going to happen if nobody can get to the office anymore, get to the retail location anymore? They were looking at policy questions like immigration without oil. They were looking at how it would affect real estate prices for real estate without oil. They were thinking about things, everything from if you were getting married, how would you have to change your wedding plans, to if you're a member of a place of worship, how would your congregation or your community continue to practice fellowship together if you can't physically get to the site of worship? And so they were examining all of these things that were very much of personal interest, things that, as a professional futurist, I never would have thought to explore all these different dimensions of everyday life and all of these things that matter deeply to different people. So collectively, the players created this resource you can take a look at, World Beyond Oil from A to Z, of all these different strategies that they might adopt and how the communities would adapt. And so that was really interesting, and it seemed to kind of profoundly impact people that they had come up with new ways of thinking about leading their daily lives and maybe change their sense of how resilient they could be. Maybe gave them a little more optimism and hope for the future, even though it was a pretty dark scenario. It was kind of a scary future to consider. It seemed that people felt a little more optimistic and empowered after going through this experience. It felt like they had strategies they might be able to use. So that could have been the end of the game, but what happened next was really surprising. Almost a year to the day after we finished running this game for the first time, and by now more than 1 million people have come back and replayed the scenario, so it continues to be kind of run and reimagined by different people around the world. But after this first gameplay, a year later, gas prices actually hit the near apocalyptic levels that we'd imagined. There was a real fuel shortage in the United States and globally, and we started to see a lot of the phenomena that we had forecast in the scenario, from there not being food on the shelves because food couldn't be delivered because they couldn't get the fuel, to people not being able to afford to get to work because they couldn't afford to fill up their gas tanks. And so all of these hypotheticals actually started to be real. And we were able to go back and look at all of the documentary media that had been produced. The players had produced more than 100,000 pieces of documentary material about this hypothetical future. We were able to look at what they forecast and able to actually follow up and interview players to say, are you being affected by this crisis now? And are you doing the things you thought you would do? And we saw at a very high level, not only did individuals actually follow through with some of their strategies of coping and adopting, But collectively, they had seen bigger phenomena. It was kind of more systemic outcomes than expert future forecasters had been able to predict. So for example, shortly after this gas prices started to go up and this crisis started to happen in real life, the New York Times ran a story about how overwhelmed different cities were in the United States by demand for public transportation, and that cities that had not really invested in public transportation, regional areas like Denver or Atlanta, that the experts in those localities were saying nobody could have ever imagined that people would want to stop driving and use public transportation. We have such a deeply ingrained car culture here. Literally nobody could have predicted this. And these were the quotes appearing in the New York Times. Nobody could have predicted it. Well, we went back and looked at players in those same regions, in Denver, in Atlanta, and we found that players in those regions had gone out and filmed in their local public transportation, and they had started to imagine what would this feel like if it were not, 100 people trying to take this bus, but 1,000 people. And they had actually predicted exactly the kind of overcrowding, shortages, kind of social unrest and anxiety that was happening in reality. They had documented it a year in advance before it had actually happened. So we started to think about World Without Oil as kind of this early warning system, right? That players, when they came together to imagine just how they would individually respond or how their neighbors would respond or community members would respond, they were able to accurately predict at a higher level what would actually happen. One of the things that we saw players doing that was really intriguing at the time is we had a number of players report that they were moving. Players who sold houses, players who moved into out of the suburbs into a more dense community, into more of an urban setting, who reported that they had basically figured out that they didn't think they would fare so well in these really spread out environments. They wanted to be in a more dense environment. They thought it'd be better for their resilience, and actually moved and actually sold houses. And one of the reasons that was being discussed in the player community was if gas prices went up, it looked like nobody would be able to afford their mortgage. And they actually predicted a bunch of people defaulting on their mortgages and a real estate crash. And this was 2007. And of course, this was a year before in the United States, we had our huge housing crash, which was a result of people not being able to afford their mortgages anymore. And it was kind of eerie that the players, even before the economists who professionally thinking about this had come out and seen this and started talking about it, the players have been talking about it. So this idea that all it takes is directing our collective imagination to a possibility space to surface a little bit earlier, just a little bit sooner, so that we can have enough time to act or make better decisions for ourselves, for our family, for our community. And you can do this as simply as playing a game, as simply as asking people, what would you do in this scenario? What would the people you care about do in this scenario? And that's really become the basis for our massively multiplayer forecasting techniques here at the Institute for the Future. We try to dream up these important, juicy scenarios and then just ask people to bring their true selves, their authentic selves to these scenarios and just think at a very deep and personal level how they might be impacted and what actions they would take. And so in the rest of this course, we're going to talk about how you can think of scenarios that you might like to tap into the collective imagination about, and what specific techniques and technologies you can use to collect that information and assess it so that you can see the future from massively many points of view. Based on my more than 10 years of leading future forecasting games with the Institute for the Future, I have come to strongly believe that the most powerful simulations of the future aren't based on mathematical models or run by supercomputers. I believe that the most compelling and informative simulations are actually powered by personal predictions, that they are generated through our own collective intelligence and our collective imagination by the games and simulations that we all play together instead of outsourcing them to a machine. But if you're going to invite hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or even 1 million people to play a future forecasting game together, you need some tools or techniques so that everybody can share their imagination in the same form, so that you can collect it and analyze it and store it and come back to it. So I want to talk to you today about one of the most effective and efficient techniques that we have for collecting that imagination for running a game. And that technique is called a future wheel. A future wheel, it's a very structured way to brainstorm potential consequences of a future scenario. If this happened, what might happen next? And if that happened, what would happen? Oh, and if that happened, what would happen next? And a future wheel is structured like a chess game or like a board game or any kind of a game. If one player makes this move, what might another player do? What might the response be? And it's really about building a chain of events, a sequence of consequences. So you're not just thinking about what might happen first, but you can take the story, you can take the scenario many, many further moves out. Okay, so the future wheel helps you game out the future, not just at the first order, but many orders of possible moves and strategies and consequences. The future wheel was first invented in the year 1971 by a researcher named Jerome Glenn, and it's really become a popular tool to use in any kind of a group setting to get a lot of that collective creativity out. And to give you an example of how it works, I actually really wanted to use a little more collective imagination here than just me. I wanted to introduce you to the person who's been directing this entire Coursera course specialization. Barry, would you mind coming from out behind the camera? And let me introduce you to all of our amazing students. Everyone, this is Barry Palsman, and he has been directing all of the videos for this course behind the camera. Thank you, Barry, for all of the amazing work you've done to make this course. I wanted to make sure everybody got a chance to meet you and also to tap your creativity a little bit. How do you feel about playing a Futures Wheel game together?
I'm very excited.
Okay, good. And now, we've never played this game together before. You have no idea what I'm about to ask you.
Nope.
And part of what I wanted to do was just to show how great this tool is for helping people, even when they're put right on the spot with no preparation. It's a really powerful tool for people just to start sparking ideas and sparking imagination. And we're going to do a very fantastical scenario. And whenever I teach this wheel, this is the first one I do, because I think it's important for people to feel like they can be imaginative and they don't have to be constrained by everyday mundane realities. So we start with something totally fantastical before we get to the kind of real future stuff. So first question for the future wheel, we're going to think of a scenario to put at the center of a future wheel. And so to figure out what that scenario will be, I have to ask you, what is your favorite superpower? Like, you know, X-ray vision, I can be invisible, I can fly, superhuman strength, I can regenerate other people with a healing touch. What's your favorite kind of fantastic superhero superpower?
I think flying probably is, yeah.
Okay, so
what
flying,
I tend to,
like Superman, flying.
yeah, flying like Superman.
Okay, so what we're going to put at the center of our future wheel is a hypothetical scenario. What if everybody woke up tomorrow with your favorite superpower? What if every person on the planet woke up suddenly with the ability to fly? So we put that at the center of the future wheel.
Okay.
And now we have all of these empty circles around it for us to fill in by simply asking the question, what's one thing that might happen in this future? So it's the first day, everyone just woke up with this superpower. What's one thing that happens in this
Traffic
world?
jams.
What?
Air traffic
Air
jams.
traffic jams. Okay, so suddenly everybody's in the air, collisions.
Yes.
Okay, that's one thing that might happen. Let's file that away. And
Okay.
what's another thing that might happen? Everybody wakes up and they can fly.
Sort of total chaos, a
Yeah.
lack of kind of structure.
A lack of structure, yeah, because what I'm thinking is if everybody woke up and could fly, would anybody do their ordinary routine? It's
No.
like nobody goes to work, nobody goes to school, everybody's like kind of out there having this extraordinary experience.
Yep.
Okay, so we can kind of fill that in. So first of all, crazy traffic jams in the sky, and a second consequence is nobody's following routine, everybody is adventuring. Okay, so you would fill in the first wheels, the first like wheel around the scenario, which is the first things that pop into your mind. And then what you do with the future wheel is you go back to all the things you thought of, and then you ask the question, well, if that happened, what might happen next? So everybody's bodies are in the sky at the same time. What's the consequence of that?
Where people, well, am I giving a consequence of my first thing?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the traffic jam, for example, a consequence would be that people would like kind of jump to help. Maybe there would be like a whole sort of growing ecosystem of like helpers. Oh my God, you're caught in the, like some people would like realize they need to become traffic wardens maybe.
Okay, so overnight you have a community forming to solve the problem of movement in space. So this is like, it's like a thing. It's a calling that people have.
Yep.
Okay, great. So that's a possible consequence. How about another consequence of everybody sort of stopped what they're doing and they're just flying. So like a kind of everyday business or everyday like life would ground to a halt. So like what might be a consequence?
Maybe the power would go out. Just no one's running the power grid, no one's churning like everything would stop, production would stop.
Right, production stops. What a funny, I mean, it's very interesting, like we're suddenly free. What do people do with themselves? Do you think that with everybody's sort of disability, people just go wherever they want in the world? I mean, suddenly you might have massive movement and nobody knows where anybody is. I mean, everybody's gone to a different country.
Yep.
Borders have become completely kind of irrelevant. There's no passport information about where anyone is. I mean, this could be a monumental day for migration on the planet. It could change forever where people live. People might just fly somewhere else and never leave. So and what would happen in a world where there was freedom of movement? And this is where you can kind of take a hypothetical, fantastical scenario and kind of start to think about really interesting things. What if there were a day with no borders and people could go wherever they wanted? As an urgent response to climate change, maybe, and we allowed people to freely flee, and how would that change? So anyway, you could play this out for hours or days. You could take your future wheel and you could send it to a dozen friends by email and ask them to fill out the circles. You could have them send their circles to other people. And it becomes this kind of living document where just starting with a simple question, what would happen if everybody woke up tomorrow with the ability to fly? The more people you share it with and the more responses they can see to stimulate their own creativity, the more weird and wonderful ideas and the more weird and wonderful directions that you can take a future. So Barry, thank you for demoing. That's how a future wheel works.
What a cool tool. Thanks.
That was just a playful example of what you might put at the center of a future wheel, but you can also use this tool to investigate really interesting, important questions for the future of any business or industry or government. I had the opportunity to work with one of the largest media buyers in the world, an organization based in China, and they were really intrigued by the World Without Oil game that we had run and by everything that had been learned by asking people to imagine this kind of extreme hypothetical scenario. And so I was invited to develop a similar scenario for this industry, for people who make a living selling advertising space on television, on radio, on billboards, on the internet to companies that want to advertise. And they asked me to generate a world without advertising scenario. And we created an online social network for people to play future wheels and play out different possibilities in this scenario. The scenario was, again, a little bit fantastical, but within the realm of plausibility for this group. The scenario, the question at the center of our future wheel was, what if the national government banned advertising? and companies and organizations were no longer allowed to buy time or space on media, physical media or digital media, to sell things or to persuade consumers to buy things or take action. What would happen to the advertising industry? What would happen to companies who use advertising to increase their audience or can increase their customer base? And we ran Futures Wheels on exactly this question. And they came up with a lot of really interesting insights for the future of advertising that they might not have generated without considering this kind of extreme, fantastic scenario. They thought a lot about the need for media platforms to switch from an advertising model to a subscription model, which was actually very forward-looking at the time, because if you look at a lot of the challenges that social media platforms are currently facing around privacy and data collection, and they are able to provide free services because of all the data they collect and sell to advertisers on the platform. A lot of people are rallying for advertising to no longer be the primary business model because it's too invasive of our privacy, and that we would be better off if people were actually paying for platforms or subscribing to platforms instead of advertising being the fundamental business model. This is something that this scenario was able to foresee. Even though it was about something a little bit different, they were able to imagine if all of our customers needed to switch to subscription, how could we support them instead of just supporting them through advertising, which is a problem people are grappling with right now. They had quite a few years head start on it. They started to think about how companies would have these big media budgets to spend on something else. Where would all the advertising dollars go? What could be done with that? And they actually, the most interesting idea that came out of it that I think about a lot, and I wonder if we're going to see a future that looks like this someday, is that the government would actually siphon off the advertising dollars to basically have massive infrastructure projects, building new bridges and new highways and investing in faster internet that would be free to the community, that would be sponsored by a company. And so that you would actually pay for the infrastructure of a nation by allowing advertisers to sponsor it instead of advertisements happening primarily in the media we consume, in our television and in our internet websites, that we would consume advertising through our infrastructure. And that would be how national governments raise money for the important sort of reinventing and rebuilding of our nations over the next decade and beyond. And that's an idea that I think is actually very forward-looking, and it's an interesting way to imagine reinventing the advertising industry for a future where increasingly nations do need to rebuild and need to invent new infrastructure, again, to deal with climate change and other changing aspects of our environment. So asking a weird question, what if advertising were banned overnight? It can allow you to draw out consequences that really allow you to consider interesting and important and urgent ways to reinvent the work that you do, or the way that your community is organized, or the way that our lives are organized. And so I invite you to download the Future Wheel tool that is available to you here on this platform, and put any question that you want to consider at the center of it. Share your Future Wheel with other students. You can share it with people you work with your friends, with your family, and start to generate this kind of collective imagination. If this happened, what might happen next? I think you'll be surprised by the amazing insights that you can generate with something as simple as a Future Wheels game. Now that you've learned how to use a Futures Wheel, you've drawn out some consequences for your own life, you can take some really urgent futures and you can take it to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues, and start to collect some information about some important futures that we're all trying to shape. Here are 5 scenarios from the ethical operating system, and I invite you to put them at the center of a Future Wheel. Start with what you would do, and then expand your circle of conversation, expand your circle of foresight to engage other people in gaming out these futures. Here are 5 Future Wheels for you to play with. Are you ready for a world in which conversation bots have been trained to imitate specific people, using data sets collected from public social media posts. These bots are deployed across social media networks, email, and text messages in super targeted, super personalized propaganda campaigns. They are highly effective in changing opinions and driving action, as personalized messages appearing to be from real friends, real family, and favorite celebrities are more influential than traditional advertisements. Are you ready for a world in which, in response to growing concerns over tech addiction and anticipating government regulation as a possible future event, several of the most popular social media and gaming companies decide voluntarily to enforce time limits? Adults are commonly limited to 2 hours per day, and children to 1 hour per day per platform. And whether a platform is limited or unlimited becomes a major selling point. Many people prefer having hard limits that prevent them from becoming addicted or too frequently distracted. But other people switch to new unlimited competitors. And this creates a new social divide in who spends time where digitally and how their mental and physical health is affected by their technology use. Are you ready for a world in which 25% of online orders are delivered by drone? Many of these drones are fitted with cameras and other sensors to collect data as they fly over neighborhoods, providing an additional revenue stream for shippers and merchants. Individuals who opt for free, unlimited drone delivery consent to the collection of data from their homes and yards. Entire neighborhoods where drone delivery is legally permitted are subject to the same data collection activities, even though not all of their individual residents or households have explicitly consented. Are you ready for a world in which a new blockchain-powered platform called Venge allows users to place anonymous bounties on actions designed to harass or terrorize specific individuals? These actions include doxing, revenge porn, swatting, social media harassment, vandalism, even violence. With one tap, you can pay someone else to act on your anger, frustration, or hate. Smart contracts pay out the bounties immediately in untraceable cryptocurrencies upon proof of completed action. Just as the internet made it easier to anonymously harass other people, the anonymity and lack of regulation inherent in cryptocurrencies makes it easier to pay people to carry out acts of hate. Are you ready for a world in which self-driving vehicles become vulnerable to a new type of real-time ransomware? Hackers access the car remotely, turn off the engine, and refuse to start the car again until the driver pays a ransom. Or rider, I guess, in the case of self-driving vehicles. Typically, this is a minor, commonplace inconvenience for small amounts of money. At worst, these attacks are timed and staged at dangerous locations, such as on train tracks shortly before a train is scheduled to approach, for much larger ransoms. And as a reminder, as you think about these scenarios and try to fill in your circles on the futures wheel and draw out those consequences, you can use these questions to spark your imagination. What might some consequences be? Here are those questions again. What new things might happen in this world? What would be different from today? What would you worry about as an individual in this world? What would you worry about as a company, as a government? You can pick any organization, a school, a hospital. What could go wrong for those organizations? For whom? Who benefits from this future? Who's gaining? What are they gaining? What emotions do people feel more often in this future? what do people start to do to adapt or cope in this future? What new habits or behaviors become commonplace? Who could exploit this future? What would they game, cheat, or take advantage of? And maybe the most important question to ask, what actions might people take to try to make this world better? Enjoy gaming out these scenarios, and you can join the conversation by looking for the hashtag #EthicalOS on social media or sharing your foresight and insights in our discussions here on Coursera. Welcome to week 3 of the Collaborative Foresight course. And this week is all about an incredibly simple but powerful technique called 2 sides to every future. And this week you're going to learn what the technique is, and you're going to get to play with it with a couple really interesting future topics like neurosensing technologies and space colonization. And this technique is really great because it works at 2 of those strengths that futures thinking develops. The practical skepticism, which means that you are looking a little bit more closely at ideas for the future and making sure that you're not getting caught up in hype or excitement, and that you're really thinking critically about possibilities. And it also builds your empathy, because futures that you might be excited about, someone else might be anxious about, or futures that you're really skeptical about, someone else might have a lot more evidence than you or a lot more motivation to believe it's possible. And you can develop a more empathetic view as a result of being exposed to that alternative feeling. So this technique, these 2 sides to every future, it boils down to taking any future idea, any scenario or forecast, and responding to it twice. You insist that you have both a positive reaction and also a skeptical or critical reaction. And we call this using your positive imagination and your shadow imagination. And let's tackle a future possibility together, and you can see how this positive and shadow imagination technique plays out. So let's consider the topic of colonizing space, or specifically Mars. Now, this is one of the more kind of far out there futures that I think a lot of people, when they hear about it, they think, this is not really something that's going to affect me or my family. Maybe this is going to be something that spans hundreds of years. I'm not going to live on Mars. What do I care about this topic? But space colonization is really interesting for lots of reasons. Just inventing the technologies necessary to get people off of planet Earth and living on another planet, that could have all kinds of ripple effects, these new scientific discoveries, these new manufacturing capabilities that for those of us who stay on Earth, it might transform our lives as well. And it also opens up possibilities about organizing society in different ways. If you're going to build a new planet and a new society on a planet, people will be thinking about different ways of organizing society and helping humanity flourish. So those are things that we could also do on Earth as well if we decide not to go to Mars. So even though this is kind of a far out, fantastical seeming future, it's a good one to consider. So let's think about one of the futures that specifically people are working on. A lot of investors, venture capitalists, putting money into projects that aim to get the first human settlement on Mars by the year 2028, so a decade by now. Elon Musk has famously said that he would like to personally help 1 million people get to Mars, to settle Mars by the early 2030s. So let's hold this future possibility in our mind, this possibility that we would have 1 million people on Mars in just a little over a decade. And now we would practice positive imagination and shadow imagination on this possibility. For positive imagination, you're simply answering the question, what's something, anything at all, that excites you about this scenario? one thing that triggers a feeling of optimism or hope, or maybe just curiosity that you think something good could happen if this future were to pass. So maybe think about colonizing Mars for a moment. Is there anything about this possibility that makes you feel good, that you like about this future? When I ask people about the scenario, here are some of the things that they say leads them to feel a little bit of positive imagination, and maybe this resonates with you as well. They talk about new technologies and scientific discoveries. Maybe there would be medical breakthroughs that we could use here on Earth, or renewable energy breakthroughs that would make it possible for us to live more safely on Earth. People talk about there being a sense of collective purpose for humanity, a new adventure that we can go on together that might unify culture or unify global society in a way that brings people together. Maybe there would be less conflict or war in this future. People talk about the idea of global collaboration, that this type of mission at scale would require countries to work together, and it would provide really practical opportunities for people to join forces in ways that we haven't done before. They talk about the chance to reinvent society, to dream up new forms of government or new ways of practicing democracy or caring for each other. That gives us permission to imagine things that we haven't taken seriously before. And people also say that we might learn things about specifically terraforming or geoengineering. So terraforming is how you change the surface of a planet to be more habitable for humans, or geoengineering is how you change the atmosphere of a planet to be more sustainable for humans. And even if nobody ever gets to Mars, maybe we will learn some geoengineering or terraforming techniques that reinvent the world into new kinds of beautiful paradises, and what might we make on Earth if we develop these techniques. Okay, so those are some reasons for positive imagination. I've also heard people say they want to be on that mission to Mars, that it would give their life purpose, that they would love to train and be one of those million people. So maybe that is also something that resonates with you. I don't know if I'm personally getting on the shuttle, but some people find that very exciting. After you have really required yourself to look for something that does feel hopeful or optimistic about the scenario, now you change directions, approach it from the opposite point of view. It's time for shadow imagination. What is something, anything at all, that worries you about this possible future? What makes you feel uneasy and anxious? What could go wrong? What horrible thing could happen? And again, even if you're wildly optimistic about a future, you think, this sounds great, I want this world to be real, you still require yourself to sit with the shadow side and make sure that you're not being naive or blindly optimistic, right? So it's very important to approach from both sides. So what are some things that might worry you about a future in which we're trying to get 1 million people permanently settled on Mars by the early 2030s? Take a moment, sit with it, let your shadow imagination dig in, and see if there's something that you would be concerned about in this future. Here are some things that people have shared with me when I have shared this scenario with them. One concern is that people with resources might invest in Mars instead of Earth, and that climate change in particular won't be addressed if people think that we can just leave this planet, that we won't invest enough resources or take urgent enough action to prevent climate change on Earth, that it's kind of a distraction in that way. People are concerned about global conflict. So colonizing Mars, could this lead to space wars? Looking at international space treaties, will people bring weapons into space? Will there be fights over who has access to the resources and the assets that are generated? Who controls the territory? Instead of, collaboration at unprecedented scale, maybe we have conflict at unprecedented scale. New diseases that we don't know about yet. What if there are microbes on Mars that we bring back to Earth and it kills everybody? That's an actual problem that medical researchers are thinking about, and it's a realistic possibility. If only 1 million people get to move to Mars, what about the other 7 billion people? Does this create a dramatic new inequality, especially if Earth becomes kind of the old land and all of the resources are invested in making Mars the place to live? At a personal level, what if my kids move to Mars and I'm stuck here? That's the anxiety I go to. My kids are only 4 years old now, but they're very adventurous. I could just see them coming home someday and say, Mom, Dad, we're moving to Mars. See ya. And I just don't know how Skype or Google Hangout will work at a space level. So that could be kind of a bummer. Here's another response that I've gotten. What if Mars is used as a kind of prison colony or forced resettlement? What if refugees are sent there on an involuntary basis? What if we don't have 1 million volunteers? Who will do the labor? What if it's really hard to colonize the planet? Will there be a kind of forced labor situation? So how will we decide who's going to do that work, and what are the risks of it being an involuntary resettlement? So, okay, bring some shadow imagination to the question. If you've never thought about this future seriously before, hopefully even just this quick exercise of using both positive and shadow imagination, it kind of unfolds the flower of this future a little bit so you could see different aspects of it, peel back the layers and start to see what makes some people excited about this and what makes some people anxious about it. And wherever you're landing, you can start to see the bigger picture. In the next video, we're going to take a look at some signals and drivers and a really well thought out future scenario that we will be able to use positive and shadow imagination to explore at a more advanced level. Because once you start using positive and shadow imagination, you can really generate a kind of more advanced technique for practicing it. So we will see you in the next video for advanced positive and shadow imagination. I want to get you ready to practice positive and shadow imagination about a really important future technology. Technology that is designed to expand how much empathy we can feel for other people, how well we can understand each other's emotions and mental states. There's actually a lot of technologies that are being invented right now to do this. So why don't we take a look at some signals of the future of empathy, explore some concrete, real work being done to invent a future that could turn out very strange and unexpected depending on how these technologies evolve and how we as society decide to adopt them. So here are some signals of the future of empathy. The first signal is an app called Priori, and this is an app for your phone that listens when you make phone calls or when you talk to your voice assistant, and it's trying to detect changes in your speech pattern, the volume that you speak, the pitch, the change in your tone, how much modulation there is in your tone as you speak. And based on this data, it can look for signs of depression or mania. And this app is actually designed for people who might experience bipolar disorder or have periods of depression or mania. The app is meant to let you know before you might even notice that you are entering into a more manic period or a more depressed period so that you can adjust your self-care techniques or speak to a doctor or therapist proactively or adjust the medication so that you can not have significant negative experiences. So this is a real app that exists trying to detect just by listening to you what you're feeling and kind of predict what you'll be feeling more of in the future. There's a technology called Emotion Inc. that Apple recently acquired. And this is a technology that uses cameras to scan for facial expressions and muscle activity that might give some indication of your affective state. It can detect feelings like joy and anger and contempt and frustration and relaxation. It can actually detect this on multiple faces within a single shot. If you were to set this camera up at the front of a room, it could detect hundreds of different facial expressions, and combined with facial recognition, actually create profiles over time of the different emotions that people have felt at the workplace, in school, or in public spaces. MIT has recently developed a new technology and demonstrated a new technology called EQ radio. And EQ radio can detect your emotion using Wi-Fi. So it doesn't even need a camera. What it does is it looks for heartbeat changes to detect if you might be feeling anxious or excited, and it can detect your heartbeat just bouncing these Wi-Fi radio signals off you, and it would be installed perhaps at the entrance of a room or the exit as people walk by, maybe in security environments, at airport security, just used to basically look for people who are maybe unusually aroused or excited, and maybe profile them as a possible risk. Researchers at Max Planck Institute in Germany hit upon a kind of scientific discovery that feels like a signal in this space. They determined that you can actually measure certain gases in the air of a public or collective environment to sense community level changes in emotion. So for example, they're measuring gases like carbon dioxide, acetone, and something called isoprene. And based on these levels, it can tell whether people in a room are in a good mood, or they're feeling sad, or they're scared. And the way that they demonstrated how effective this was is they had people in different movie theaters watching different movies, scary movie, kind of sexy movies, comedies, and they were able to tell just by measuring the gases in the air which movie people were watching. And if you're willing to wear a headset that can track your neurological activity, you can get customized reports on different types of emotions and sensations. For example, the Emotive Insight headset comes with an app that tracks things like your stress level or how interested or engaged you are. And it can also recommend activities based on how you're feeling. Over time, it might track how are the people around you making you feel, how are certain physical environments or locations making you feel? Are these activities improving positive moods or creating negative moods? So you can start to get a lot of data about the people, the places, and the activities that stress you out or make you feel better. And these headsets and apps already exist. And those are all signals about ways that the world or ourselves might collect information about feelings and emotions, but there are also new ways to share emotions and feelings that might change the way that we experience empathy or develop empathy. For example, there was an app, not super popular, not like it wasn't the new Instagram or Snapchat or WhatsApp, but it was an interesting experiment. It was called Mooditude. And Mooditude was a visual way for you to share your emotion with your social network. You would create these little charts that showed how nervous you were, how angry you were, how sad you were, and it would be like sort of a fingerprint for your emotional state at that time. And within the social network on the app, you could just see how people were feeling throughout the day, kind of get an extra layer of information besides, just what they might tell you through words or through pictures. We've talked about the Intel adrenaline dress. I think we looked at this signal in an earlier class. This was the invention that allowed a dress to change its shape based on how much adrenaline your body is producing. And this might be a way that you could let people know, maybe as a warning sign. If you really have that strong fight or flight response, you get this kind of armor that goes up, or the protective shell that goes up that lets people know, I am not in a mood to be played with or troubled with right now. So the way that fashion might allow people to have more empathy for what you're feeling right now. The same emotive headset that there already exists an app to track your feelings also has an app for sharing your feelings with other people through an avatar. So there's this wonderful little emotive emo bot that you can attach to your neurosensing device so that it's a little bot that other people can look at, and the robot makes happy faces or little nervous fidgets if you're nervous, and it's a way for you to kind of create a virtual character that expresses your feelings. Maybe you are a little more comfortable allowing a virtual robot to tell the world how you're feeling instead of it being maybe quite so personal as it being your face that is expressing these feelings. There is an app called Coco that is training people to be more empathetic towards other people, essentially being cognitive behavioral therapists for other people. The way the Coco app works is you say how you're feeling, and that gets sent out to a bunch of other people who've been trained how to use this app, and they respond to you with empathy about why you're feeling that way and what you might do to make yourself feel better. So it's kind of like this super emergency system. If you're feeling something you don't want to feel, you can send out this alert and get a bunch of people trained to help you change how you're feeling. There is a neurotransmitter called Think that can actually change how you're feeling. Now, the way that this signal exists now, it's a setting that you control. It works with transcranial magnetic stimulation, and you can tell this device if you want to be more excited or you want to be calmer. And it will just sit right here and do a little transcranial magnetic stimulation and change how you're feeling. And this has been well validated clinically. It does seem to work. People will either feel more alert, more aroused, more excited, more attentive, or they feel calm, they're relaxed, they're chilling, they're less anxious. What's interesting to me about this signal is the idea that maybe in the future, I wouldn't necessarily be determining how I want to feel, but maybe I could be getting feelings from other people. Maybe my partner or my child could send me their feelings so that I could actually feel what they're feeling and maybe get that internal visceral sense, oh, this is how anxious my kid is today, or this is how my husband's feeling today. And if I can feel that in my own mind and body, maybe that will help me connect better with them. And as a kind of farthest out there signal in this field of the future of empathy, we've seen a lot of evidence that Facebook is internally working on some kind of platform that will allow people to share their thoughts and feelings through neurotransmitters rather than typing what they're thinking or sharing photos or videos of what they're feeling. Facebook is looking to create a direct neurotransmitting social media interface where you share it before you have even said it or necessarily thought it yourself. And they have a whole division set up to work on this, and there hasn't been a lot of public communication about what their full intentions are with this, but it is certainly worth, as a signal, keeping an eye on. So what happens when you add up all of these signals? New technologies that can detect our emotions, our stress levels, our feelings. We can share them with others in exciting ways or maybe terrifying ways. What kind of world might we live in if these technologies all intersect and become popular and widespread at scale? In the next video, you're going to visit a future where all of this has happened and some good things are happening and some weird things are happening and some scary things are happening. And hopefully this will be a good space for you to explore your positive and shadow imagination about the future of empathy. See you in that future. You're about to watch 4 stories from the future. These stories are all about the future of empathy. We're going to fast forward a few years, and we're going to take a look at some technologies that might change how we connect with each other and how we relate to each other in really dramatic ways. These technologies don't exist yet, But early versions of them are already being created and studied in research labs all over the world. In fact, someday, these empathy technologies might be as common as mobile phones are today. So why should we spend time thinking about a far-off future when there are so many urgent challenges for us to deal with today? Well, imagining the future is fun. It's a chance to be really creative and inventive, but it's also important. Thinking about the future is a way to take an ethical stand. When we face the future, we're trying to make sense of changes that are already starting to happen all around us. And we're using our logic and intuition to try to figure out where those changes might eventually lead. In fact, when we face the future, what we're really doing is participating in a process of anticipatory history. We imagine what we might do in a world full of new possibilities so that we can prepare to act ethically and responsibly. We think about difficult decisions that we might have to make in the future and how those decisions will affect others. By thinking about that future now, we give ourselves more time to consider our response, more time to figure out how to be an upstander when change is happening fast. In other words, thinking about the future today prepares us to make history tomorrow.
Today is a very special day. Feel That 1.0. Okay. This is the first part of it. Turn it on, and voila. This band is going to measure my heart rate, my blood pressure, and how much sweat is on my skin. Also, and this is the part that's really, really cool, is it can measure my hormone levels, like my adrenaline level, so it'll know if I'm scared or excited, and my cortisol level, so it'll know if I am just stressed out. Also, it can detect oxytocin, which is the love hormone. So if I have a crush on someone, this little guy will pick that up and it'll know. That could get a little awkward. There is this microphone on the side right here, and it's going to analyze my voice for emotion. They have algorithms that'll figure that out based on the tone of my voice and how fast or slow I'm speaking. If you're on Feel That, you should add me. I'm at Kasha, Kasha, and you should be able to feel my very first feel. This is the neuromagnetic stimulator peripheral. Basically, whatever your sensors pick up, I should be able to feel the same thing. I'm gonna try it now. I don't know how to put this on. I think we should try it like this. Yeah? I just set my receive settings to public, so if you added me, you should send a feel at me. I may just pause filming for a little and wait to see if anything happens. Okay, I definitely feel that. You are in an amazing mood. And I don't even know you, but I can feel you. This is, whoa. This is an awful feeling. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do to help? You feel really nervous. So consider this your official pep talk. Go Max! Okay. This is a weird feeling. Wait a second. Wait, is this your dog? Did I just feel your dog? Okay, so that was my unboxing of the Feel That 1.0. You guys should get your own, try it out. Add me on Feel That at Kasha and send me a feel. Bye guys.
The first time we used it together, she actually turned to me and asked, "Can you feel that?" Just like in the commercial. It's kind of a weird sensation at first. You know the feelings are coming from outside you, but you still recognize them. You know they're not your feelings, but you experience them as if they were happening to you. An instant when you know with certainty that this sudden emotional wave you're feeling is coming from someone you love, it's mind-blowing. I've read that the number one reason why people get rid of feel that is that they can't stand feeling someone else's anxiety or anger. With me and Izzy, it was different. Feeling her anxiety, it didn't make me feel more anxious. In a weird way, it calmed me down. It reminded me that we'll always be here for each other. When the thing happened, Izzy was in Tainan, riding back to her grandparents' house, and I just gotten up. We could feel each other, that gentle contact, rewarding and calming. I could tell she was tired, and just begun to doze off in her seat. The fear spike was so strong it knocked me down. I lay there, heart racing, adrenaline pumping. Then just as quickly, everything got calm, and all I could feel was this dizzying warmth and love. For 5 long minutes, I felt it. Felt her, holding on as tightly as she could, then finally fading. Long before I heard the news, I knew what had happened. I replay those last 5 minutes every morning, always starting with the fear spike. It's as much hers as the love. It's not because I can't let go. It's because I don't want to.
The first quake hit at 4:40 in the afternoon. Most people were headed home from school or work. Heart rates jumped when the magnitude 6.3 quake hit, staying high through the 90 seconds of shaking. The pattern of racing hearts matched the propagation of seismic waves from the quake center. But it was the readings from an hour later that really got the people's attention. The second quake measured 7.8 on the Richter scale, almost 200 times stronger than the first. It knocked down hundreds of buildings, trapping over 42,000 people beneath tons of rubble. Looking at the biodata from immediately after is gut-wrenching. Spikes of panic, followed by ongoing waves of heartbeats dropping to zero. It wasn't just the earthquake itself. It was fear, spiking blood pressure and triggering hundreds of fatal heart attacks, all of them recorded in minute detail. It was the first natural disaster the world watched not just in photos or videos, but in live biodata. Nearly 500 million people logged into the Feel That network that night to experience the live stream. For people who weren't in the affected areas, seeing the biodata made the tragedy that much more real, more relatable. In the following days, an emotional cloud descended over California, like the ash that hangs in the air after a volcano eruption. Hundreds of thousands of survivors who had lost their homes or loved ones continued to share their data. Grief trended on the Feel That network for more than a month. The global donations to the relief effort were unprecedented. When the world could truly feel what people had gone through, no one could ignore it. And it wasn't just money that people gave. Volunteers organized efforts to witness the survivors' pain. Throughout the long process of rebuilding, there was always someone online willing to receive the survivors' feelings, even when they were difficult to bear.
The demonstration that night didn't go as planned. There were too many people. Things got out of control. 36 protesters died in our city alone. My brother Carlos was one of them. Drone cameras documented everything. It was hard for our family to watch. At first, the video archives seemed to match the official reports exactly. They said that my brother died accidentally in the chaos and the crush of the mob. But then we started to hear rumors. The video had been faked. Those 36 protesters didn't die in the street. They had been arrested. Police took the protesters into custody. And that's where they died. That's when we started looking at the biodata. Someone in authority had altered the drone video. But they couldn't alter the data collected by field data implants and digital ink tattoos. Every electric shock, every chokehold had been documented by the victims' bodies themselves. Some of the victims, including my brother, had newer systems able to track body posture, limb position, and motion. Investigators were able to construct painfully lifelike simulations of what really happened. By the end of 2036, people around the world knew what had been done to my brother, and not just him. They knew the names of the accused and the faces of all the victims. Because their bodies could remember what happened, the world could remember too.
Are you ready to feel that future? Does that look like a social media platform that you would like to join? Hopefully, the wheels are turning, your future wheels are being generated as we speak. And I want to let you know that that immersive video scenario was actually created for a project called Face the Future that the Institute for the Future developed with an organization called Facing History and Ourselves that works with high school students around the world to think about how the choices that they make today might shape the world we live in tomorrow. And we decided to explore this question of the future of empathy and empathy generating technologies. And we were able to ask 10,000 high school students to consider this scenario. They came online, they filled out an online version of the future wheel, and we played this kind of massively multiplayer Foresight game with 10,000 high school students who took seriously this idea that this future technology would exist, that they would have the opportunity to join the social network, and they played out as many possible consequences in as many different domains as they wanted. They were thinking about the future of dating, the future of volunteering and activism, the future of education and working, the future of sports and entertainment, the future of religion, the future of bullying. Any topic that they cared about, they could bring to this scenario and explore through drawing out the consequences. One of the things that we did in this game to help the students both be optimistic about the future, but also a little bit critical about it as well, was we created a series of positive imagination and shadow imagination prompts that they could use to start drawing out consequences. So what I'll do now is I will share with you some of these prompts that you can use to exercise your own positive imagination about the scenario and also your shadow imagination. And besides just the fun of really digging in deep to this particular scenario, you can also use these questions, these prompts, as a way to understand that positive and shadow imagination. It's not just a gut reaction, that you can actually build a really systematic and rigorous set of questions to take people deeper into their most optimistic ideas about the future and also their most anxious or pessimistic ideas. So this is a way to model for you how you might take the idea of positive and shadow imagination and build it out to go deeper and deeper and deeper into a particular scenario. So here are some of the questions that we asked our 10,000 high school students and also the questions that I would like to ask you. So for positive imagination, we asked people to fill in the blank on this question. I would let blank feel me. In other words, who would you friend on this network? Who would you be willing to share your feelings with? Parents, your romantic partners, friends, strangers? Who would you invite into your network? For shadow imagination, how would you fill in this blank? I would block fill in the blank from feeling me. Would you block your parents, block your romantic partner, block your teachers, block your boss, block people from a different political party, different points of view? Who would you not want to have access to this information about you? For positive imagination, we asked who or what would be really fun to feel? What would be the most fun feeling that you would like to connect to vicariously? For shadow imagination, who or what would be hard to feel? If somebody sent you a particular experience or emotion, what might you not want to receive, not want to sit with? Positive imagination, if you could get 1 million people to feel one thing through this technology, what would it be and why? Shadow imagination, what's the most dangerous thing about the Feel That network? Bringing positive and shadow imagination to the same question, it's a presidential election, or it's a national election. How is the Feel That network used? How can you imagine it being used for good? Positive imagination. How can you imagine it being used not for good? Shadow imagination. You're a parent in this future. How do you use the Feel That network for parenting? Positive imagination answer, shadow imagination answer. Imagine you're 80 years, 90 years old in this future and this technology exists. How might you use the Feel That network differently from other people? Positive imagination, shadow imagination answer. How is the Feel That technology being used in schools? Elementary schools, high schools, universities, lifelong learning. Do you have a positive imagination reaction? How about a shadow imagination reaction? You run a huge company in the future. What kind of company might you be running, and how would you use the Feel That technology as running this company? Positive imagination, shadow imagination. And then finally, we would ask any participant in one of these games, what's a question you would like to ask? If you had access to 10,000 people's imagination, what question would you like to ask about how this technology might be used? And that gives you, I think, maybe an even more hands-on way of thinking about how the future is like a game and that it's best played as a massively multiplayer game. When you can get hundreds or thousands or 10,000 people answering these really personal questions and bringing their biggest hopes and their biggest anxieties about a new technology or about a future to the table together, we can build a truly powerful empathy for all of the ways a new technology or a new future might affect other people.
Hi, I'm Lynn Jeffrey. I'm the Director of Foresight Training at the Institute for the Future. I've been here for 18 years, and I am an ethnographer of the future. So let me unpack that a little bit. Ethnographers are kind of like investigative journalists of human behavior. We try to understand how people live, why they're making the choices they're making, what they hope for, what they value, what they're worried about. And ethnographers of the future are trying to understand the human signals of change, the new behaviors that are actually building the future. So some signals of change might be a technology, but as an ethnographer, I would look at how people are using a new technology and what they're doing with it that's different and how it's actually changing their lives. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to identify leading edge behaviors. That's all the new, amazing, crazy things that people are doing that are building the future. It could be something a kid is doing, a grandparent, it could be a developer who's building a new technology, who's actually using it themselves to do something different. But these are the leading edge behaviors that are making the way for a new future. And I'm going to give you my 5 top tips for going out and finding the people who are doing these things. Let's say that your future's topic is the future of work. Today, you can already see that more and more people are finding their jobs and working almost entirely through an app or online platform like Uber or Airbnb or Twitch. You're trying to imagine a future where everyone does work that way. What if teachers found their work that way? What if doctors did that? What if there was an Uber for police, or police somehow were working via Twitch streams? Well, you can start to explore that future and gather evidence from the leading edge behaviors of people who are already doing it today. So my first tip for exploring this leading edge behavior would be participate. Do it yourself. Try the behavior yourself. Try the new technology yourself. So in the example of the future of work, try out driving Uber for a day, or try out your own Twitch stream and see what that's like, or hire someone for $5 on Fiverr. But try it out, participate, and see what it's like. Tip number 2, look for people who are starting to get attention for doing amazing things. Who's being invited to speak at conferences? Who's being interviewed in blogs and on podcasts? Who's being celebrated by the community? So if I were trying to understand people who are making a living on Twitch, I would look at who's being invited to TwitchCon, the annual conference where they celebrate people who are doing really new and unusual things on Twitch. Tip number 3, compare people doing the same leading edge behavior in different places or different contexts. So again, I'm trying to understand the future of work on apps and online platforms. I would look at something new that's happening on a familiar platform. For example, Airbnb just launched in Arabic in the United Arab Emirates. So I would want to understand who are the first people to be renting out their homes in the UAE. What's different about the way that they're describing their homes or the kinds of places that they're renting compared to other places? And you can try to find English speakers who are on the platform and reach out to them, or you could use an online translation app to try to read some of the Arabic. Tip number 4, go where the people are. Look for meetups, conferences, networking groups, online forums, anywhere that you can meet and talk to real people about what they're doing. So, for example, if I were trying to understand the world of social media influencers and the future of work, I might go on to meetup.com, the website, and look for people in London, for example, who are working in the social media influencer space. And if I did, I would find at least 5 groups, meetups alone, where people are meeting in real time, in real places, and you can go and meet them and talk to them. And you could do that for any city in the world. Tip number 5, look for the new experts and the new coaches. Who's sharing, who's selling their knowledge, who's helping people get better at this leading edge behavior. For example, I like to look on YouTube and find these super specific channels, YouTube channels, where someone is teaching you how to have a really great Twitch stream, or how to succeed on Fiverr. There are all kinds of very deep experts from people who are a little bit under the radar unless you're really inside the community. So go look for those new experts. When you find these people, don't be shy. You should reach out to them directly. And in my experience, if you tell someone, I've identified you as someone who's making the future in an amazing way, they're going to be excited to talk to you. If you're able to, it's always nice to give back in some way, a donation or a gift card if you're able. And you can set up a video chat with them. You could send them questions over email. You could have a conversation on social media. There's lots of different ways to make it easy for that person to talk to you. What should you ask them? Well, you can check out my 5 favorite questions for asking someone about a leading edge behavior. This has been the mini masterclass in how to be an ethnographer of the future.
Welcome back. I'm excited today to teach you one of the Institute for the Future's newest tools for thinking about the future more creatively. And I actually created this tool so I can share with you that it's based on leading edge neuroscience research into why some people seem to be really quick to notice change in the world around them and really fast to adapt to it successfully, and why some other people seem to be slower to notice change and maybe don't adapt successfully. It turns out that if you want to spot change faster and adapt faster, you need to do more than just think rationally about how the future might be different. You need to think emotionally about the future. You have to feel it before it happens. If you're interested in the science, I can give you the 1-minute quick breakdown. There's a part of the brain called the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC for short. It does a lot of important things, but one of the things that it is involved with is scanning the world around you for signals that the world is changing. The PCC is the part of the brain that tells you, hey, your strategies might not work anymore. You need a new strategy. Or, hey, those old habits aren't going to be successful in the future, try something new. This is the part of the brain that basically operates as an alarm system saying, wake up, the world is changing and you need to do something differently. Now, some people have an underactive PCC. These are the people who don't notice change quickly, they don't adapt quickly enough. And you really want an active PCC, you don't want a lazy one, because if your PCC is a little lazy, then you are more likely to not see what's coming and get blindsided by the future. What can you do about it if you have a lazy PCC? Well, there are things you can do to fire it up. And one of the most important things you can do to fire up an underactive PCC is to provoke really strong emotions when you think about possible futures. And that's because emotions wake up the PCC. They're like a trigger to say, oh, I feel something really strongly. Maybe I should pay attention to what's triggering these strong emotions. So this tool is all about connecting really strong emotions that you can feel directly yourself. When you consider possible futures, it'll wake up that PCC and help you spot change and adapt to it faster. It's really fun. It's fun to do with a big group of people. So I'm going to walk you through how it works, and then we're going to demo it with a few people. And before you know it, you will be feeling all your future feelings. Ready to explore 4 future feelings? Here's how it works. First, pick any forecast or scenario. It might be an Institute for the Future video you've already watched here on Coursera, or a scenario you've read as part of this class. Maybe it's a scenario you've created yourself. Whatever you've picked, write a summary of that future at the top of the tool. Next, pick any 4 emotions you want to explore. The standard set is happy, anxious, angry, and thankful. But you can swap in any you want. Try lonely, amazed, bored, curious, disgusted, confident, hurt, proud, afraid, embarrassed, excited. Every emotion you pick will help you explore a different aspect of your chosen future. Now, imagine you are living in the future forecast or scenario you've chosen. Project yourself into this future as if it were a world you could already visit, or a virtual reality you could immerse yourself in. Think about how it would feel to live in this reality. Specifically, try to come up with an event or situation or moment in your daily life in that future that would make you feel each of the 4 specific futures feelings you've chosen. What might happen that would make you feel angry in this future? What might occur that would make you feel thankful? For example, if some deeply personal feelings of mine went viral on the neurosensing Feel That network, I would feel embarrassed. Or If my daughter became interested in a career in space research after she launched a CubeSat in her 3rd grade class, I would feel excited. You may notice that depending on the scenario, it's easier for you to imagine positive emotions or negative emotions. But you'll get a better view of this possible future if you push yourself past your immediate reaction to imagine a fuller range of emotions, the good and the bad. Write a quick sentence or 2 on each emotion card to capture your ideas. This is a great tool to use in a group. Ask everyone to come up with their own 4 feelings about the same forecast or scenario. You'll be amazed at how different people react to the same future with very different feelings. This is a fun and fast way to build your empathy for other people's futures. One more tip. Whatever you come up with using this tool, it's a fantastic starting point for telling stories about the future. Try elaborating one of the feelings into a short story, or a video, or a comic. Whatever kind of story you create, it can help more people move beyond just thinking about the future and into really deeply feeling it. And now you know. That's how you explore 4 future feelings. Welcome to this live demonstration of the 4 Future Feelings tool. I'm Jane, your instructor. You know me already. This is Barry and Aicha, who I'm so glad to have with us today. Why don't you guys introduce yourself to our amazing students?
Sure. I'm Barry. I'm mostly interested in the future of VR, virtual reality, and its effect it can have on human behavior and really moving the world forward.
And you're not just interested in studying it, you actually create VR experiences as well.
That's right, yeah.
Awesome. And Aicha, go ahead.
My name's Aicha, and I'm interested in the future of climate action and how people will organize to accelerate that.
Well, that's an interesting topic to connect with what we're doing today, because we're actually using the Explore 4 Future Feelings tool to explore a climate change related scenario, which we're calling the extreme drought scenario. And this is inspired by an actual event that recently occurred. We did some research on the extreme drought experienced in Cape Town, where residents were at one point restricted to 50 liters of water per day, which is way less than most people are used to consuming. And we've decided to explore a scenario where, in our own local context here in California, citizens might be asked to reduce their water consumption to the same amount. And we've actually created an artifact from this future, which is really an artifact from the past, because this is the actual Cape Town guidelines for how to survive on 50 liters of water per day. Everything from you're using 10 liters if you take a 1-minute shower, 9 liters if you flush the toilet. You need a liter for, if you have a dog, a liter for them to drink. You need to drink 3 liters of water a day for your own health. And so we're going to use these guidelines and that concept of surviving on 50 liters of water a day to explore how we might feel in this future. How does this strike you?
Wonderful. Actually, I mean, kind of, sad, but I was in Cape Town when there was the water drought.
So you have
for a few days, and I do have some firsthand emotional feelings, that I had while I was there, and so I think it's an awesome topic.
Okay, great. So you bring some real experiences to inform the future. Have you ever been in this kind of a context?
No, but I can definitely see myself in this context. I can see it happening in the near future.
It doesn't strike you as an impossible future?
No, not in California, especially not here. No, now that we've had drought, so.
Okay, great. Well, you had a chance to think about the scenario a little bit in advance. You've had it for a couple days, and I asked you each to pick 4 feelings that you would like to explore. So, Barry, what 4 feelings are you going to be trying to feel today?
So I'll be trying to feel a guilty feeling, feeling sick, feeling scared, and feeling inspired in some ways.
Oh, very good. Full spectrum of feelings. Aicha, what feelings will you be feeling today?
I'll be feeling angry, depressed, also scared, and hopeful.
Okay, so your last two feelings are actually really similar. It will be interesting to see if you're imagining the same kinds of events or moments, or maybe having different points of view, because we love this tool. Oftentimes people will have wildly different opinions and reactions, so I'm very curious to see. Well, why don't we start, Aisha, why don't you start us out? What might make you feel angry in this future?
In this future, I will be feeling angry because of mostly at the enormous for-profit corporations who have contributed to destroying the environment for the sake of profit, and also angry at the government officials who have not done enough to legislate and enforce regulations on these said for-profit corporations.
So this is interesting. It sounds like you're anticipating kind of this level of anger persisting. So if you wake up, you're angry at corporations, you're angry at government. That this is a future where, in general, you just experience more anger than you do today?
Yeah, angry at not doing enough in the past when we could have.
Okay, great. That's a great place to start out. Certainly, I mean, I hope we don't get to a future where we're waking up angry all the time. But it's good to imagine that that's a possibility. Barry, what you have guilty as your first feeling.
Guilty. I think for me personally, I can imagine feeling guilty about my past levels of consumption for water. I can imagine I'm using 200 liters more every day, and as we're washing the dishes, we're washing our clothes, we're taking long showers, just not even thinking about it. And so I can definitely imagine waking up feeling guilty of that kind of at that bigger level. And then also, just on a day-to-day level, maybe I forgot to turn the pipes off on the toilet and I accidentally flushed the toilet, and just old habits die hard. And so there's little kind of micro moments that might make me feel guilty in that moment while I'm there.
I can really relate to that. I'm actually thinking at a personal level, I live with my husband and 2 kids, and I might be angry at my husband if he took a 5-minute shower and used up most of our water for the day. And I could imagine the fights of the future where we're arguing about something that I would never have a fight about today. And similarly for guilty, I could imagine if I had too many cups of coffee and I didn't realize what I was consuming, and now my kids are not able to, I can't cook for them, or there's something that they have to pay the price for some dumb mistake that I made. So I think that now you both are putting me in the mindset of, what is it? How does this change our responsibilities to each other too? That we have a responsibility to our entire household. Well, this is off to a great start. Barry, how about emotion number 2, feeling sick?
So for feeling sick, I was thinking that, just the idea of imagining, sort of calculating the limited amount of water we'll have, I'll probably wake up every day feeling a little more dehydrated than I am today. I'll probably have, chapped lips. And just in general, our diets are most likely going to have to change. So we'll have, no meat, no dairy products, no eggs, no even coffee, is going to be sort of a water-intense product. So I think a lot of things are going to have to change in our diets, and that'll just kind of this feeling of feeling sick and a little off.
Yeah, okay, so a future in which it's like almost like this, it's like the water flu. It's like the drought flu, because we're like a little bit dehydrated and we're eating not maybe the food we're used to getting, the nutrition and the protein we need. That sounds terrible. I don't want to wake up in that future. Well, as long as we're feeling terrible. Aisha, what's a moment you might feel depressed in this future?
I can see myself feeling depressed in this future because I won't exercise as much, and I exercise regularly, and I like to, and it makes me feel uplifted and energetic and happy, and I can, in this future I'm depressed because I don't have that outlet to, run and cycle, and I won't be able to take a shower. I won't be able to exercise because I won't be able to take a shower, and I want to waste that water. So I won't be with less exercise. My mental state will definitely
not as
Oh,
uplifted.
that's really interesting, right? So you're choosing between offending people because you smell terrible, because you've been sweating and then went to work, and also you're probably right that there's increased water consumption required when you've been sweating,
Yeah.
and you may not have the luxury of needing to drink an extra liter of water because you worked out for an hour.
Yeah, drinking too. I was thinking of just showering, but yeah, I'll need more water when I'm exercising.
It really makes me wonder about the future of sport in climate change. I'd never actually thought about that before, and I love how these tools bring up interesting like different directions to take our foresight. I don't know that we've ever done any research reports for athletic organizations or professional sports or school sports about the future of sports being affected by climate change, but no, I'm kind of wanting to. We've got one more kind of dark feeling. You both chose scared. Aisha, when are you feeling scared in this future, and is it the same for Barry? We will find out.
Yeah, in this future, I'm going to be scared because being in California, there's probably going to be wildfires raging, and I can see a wildfire going on in the town right next to me, and I'm going to be scared, not knowing whether I need to flee, take refuge somewhere, if I'm going to be safe, my family's going to be safe. So, and someone I know's house, my aunt, maybe her home just burned down, and people may be dying, and so I'm terrified of wildfires.
So hearing you say this, does this make you think that if this future were to come to pass and California really were in this kind of extreme drought, would you consider relocating? Would you go live somewhere else?
Yeah, I would consider it. Yeah, to avoid being burned in a wildfire. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about the choices we're going to be making. There's going to be a lot of movement around the planet as certain areas become harder to live in, and who will get left behind, who will have the resources and the privilege or opportunity to leave. Though that feeling raises a lot of big questions. Barry, what was making you feel scared in this future?
I just sort of the idea that, if we've reached this level, this sort of critical level where we're only allowed 50 liters a day, is tomorrow going to be 25 liters?
Yeah.
What about when it's 15 liters a day? And sort of just seeing, like, is this the beginning of a pattern of constraint that is going to be a really tough place to live? All these feelings just sort of exacerbated as we get that number gets smaller per day. And so I think I'm mostly scared of just is it going to end? Is it going to get worse? And if it does get worse, are we going to have to leave California? Or is it going to be chaos? Are people going to raid the grocery stores? Or, is society going to kind of break down in a way as that number gets smaller and smaller and less manageable?
That makes a lot of sense, because I know in Cape Town, what they were trying to prevent was what they were calling day zero, which was the day when they really ran out of water resources, not just to allow people to have 50 liters a day, but in which a majority of residents would not get any water at all. And so you're thinking about, when do people leave? Mass evacuations. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but we literally just saw this almost play out in one of our major global cities. So it's feeling realer and realer to me as you talk about
Exactly.
it. Okay, well, let's take a deep breath, and we've got one positive emotion here for each of you, which is hopeful and inspired. Aisha, give us that hope. Why are you feeling hopeful? Please tell us.
I'm going to be hopeful because everyone, hopefully around me, is also going to be feeling these things, and it's going to push people to organize more and protest, take the streets, do whatever they can to put political pressure on their elected officials, and that pressure is going to get politics to move and change. So I'm going to be hopeful that people will be fed up and doing more to change things.
So no crisis and no suffering is without a purpose in this future, that it can be used as a springboard.
Yes. I'm hopeful that the bad times will lead to good.
Great. And imagine if we could get people to feel the anger, depression, and scared before we're actually experiencing it, and start that pressure today. I mean, that's kind of the point of doing this futures thinking work. Amazing. Barry, you're going to leave us feeling inspired in this scenario.
Yes.
Please do.
Oh, yes. Well, I think that in this scenario, I would feel inspired by the amount of innovation that's happening kind of at large scale, government initiatives. Maybe they're doing some water capture technology, water farms start popping up so that they can sort of extract water molecules out of the air. I also think even at the local level, small level, like in a workplace, encouraging people to wear their dirty dress clothes day after day, that sort of thing, like just seeing the innovation come alive and sort of the creative process happen under this constraint situation.
I love that. I think the flexibility of humanity will be shining in this scenario, and I agree. When I was looking at what were the actual tips and techniques that developed in Cape Town during this scenario, that was one that stood out to me as well. The dirtiest clothing contest at workplaces where the employee who wore the clothes the most days in a row won a prize, and just how can we encourage people to be flexible, rethink? I mean, it's just culture that tells us we have to present in a certain way or consume in a certain way, and we can recreate that culture if we want to. That does make me feel inspired. Well, thank you both for feeling such a wide range of 4 feelings. It's not always fun to think about some of these more difficult scenarios, but I think it is fun to stretch our imagination and realize how vivid we can make these kind of abstract, faraway futures feel. How did this tool work for you guys? What's sort of your takeaway from this?
Yeah, I think for me, just putting myself in this emotional state in the future, in my work with VR and sort of creating these films in virtual reality where we really want to immerse people in feelings, in emotions, turning sort of facts about the future into feelings about the future. I think it unlocks all sorts of realistic feelings. This exercise is probably going to be really helpful in my work. So.
Right, so I guess if you were going to create a VR experience of extreme drought, any of these 8 scenes could become the basis for a character, a plot, an action that you could ask people to concretely experience. Aisha, how about for you?
Yeah, I found it really useful to put myself in these specific situations and kind of experienced it. I experienced myself going through these situations, and so it was good to put myself in these real life, tangible, plausible scenes, and see what could be, and I found it, extremely useful.
And as someone who is working in the space of climate action, could you see this kind of, would it be a springboard for you in any way?
Yeah, I think this is a good tool to get people to move, and because I'm interested in climate action, I think that this is something that we could do to get people to, in order to feel the future, then get them to move and actually act. It's not just based on facts, but people can move based on their feelings and their emotions, and so it's a good way to get people to move forward.
It's so true, because I think people are kind of tuning out the numbers. People hear we need to. This is the tipping point, this degree change, or this many icebergs melt, but it's all it's numbers, it's abstract, and here you are connecting with people potentially where they will feel it most. Amazing. Well, thanks for doing this demo. This was really enlightening for me. You sparked some new thoughts for me. Hopefully now that you have seen the demo, you are ready to feel 4 future feelings or 8 future feelings or 20 future feelings on any scenario that you like. You could play with this scenario or pick any of the scenarios that you've experienced while taking this course. I wish you luck and lots of emotion, and I can't wait to hear what you have felt. Welcome to week 5 of the Collaborative Forecasting course. You have learned all kinds of gameful techniques for gaming out the future, from simulations that are powered by personal predictions to drawing out consequences with the future wheel, using both positive and shadow imagination, and even card games that can help you generate exciting ideas that you never thought of before for a future that benefits all. In this last week of the course, we're going to talk about the best way to conclude any game, which is with an epic win. And an epic win in gaming slang, it usually refers to an incredible outcome, something amazing that happened that you might not have even thought was possible. It was a come from behind victory. It was a huge success of a strategy that had never been tried before. It's something that really surprises you and catches you off guard with just how positive the outcome could be. When it comes to shaping the future, designing the future, anticipating future consequences, we're all looking for that epic win. An epic win that allows as many people as possible to benefit from a given future. A win where we all come together and collaborate to achieve something at a higher order or a higher scale, a victory that will affect millions or billions of lives. That's the scale of victory we're going for. And to introduce to you on a practical level how an epic win might come to be, let me tell you about one of the most just shocking and effective future forecasting campaigns that I have ever encountered. And this campaign was called SlaughterBots. We didn't create this at the Institute for the Future. This was actually created by researchers at the University of California at Berkeley. And they created it to address their growing unease with the evolution of a specific technology, the evolution of drones, and particularly their possible weaponization. They created an immersive future scenario in the form of a video called SlaughterBots. And we're going to put a link to this video if you'd like to watch it. I do want to caution you that there is violence in this video. It was created intentionally to be disturbing, to make people really feel horrified by the potential for weaponized drones. So if you watch it, it might make you feel quite bad. So you don't have to watch it. But if you'd like to see a really effective example of immersive forecasting, you can follow the link to the SlaughterBots scenario. If you'd rather not watch it, I will just summarize for you that they've imagined a future where anybody can put essentially a bomb or a gun attached to a drone, the unmanned aerial vehicle, and send it out into the world and use facial recognition to target specific individuals, whether they are people who have been chosen intentionally or matching to their social media activities. Perhaps you might want to target people who are members of a particular Facebook group or who have liked the posts of a certain political figure. They have imagined a really targeted way of enacting violence from a distance remotely with these vehicles. It's quite distressing to look at. Now, this is an interesting example of moving from the kind of future that keeps us up at night, that makes it hard to sleep, to moving towards a future that gets us out of bed in the morning, the opportunity to do something good for the world, the opportunity to enact a solution. What happened after this scenario was released is that people who make drones got involved in the conversation. In particular, Chris Anderson, who's one of the leading figures in the drone technology space, one of the first leading technologists to adopt drones as his signature passion piece many years ago, he got involved in this conversation. He watched the scenario and he posted a really compelling and vulnerable blog post called "We Are the People They Warned You About." And he wrote about his role in developing smart drone technology. He said, "I'm an enabler of what's described in the SlaughterBots scenario, but I have no idea what I should do differently." He started to grapple with the ethical implications of the technology he was making. He wrote about what he did after he watched this video. He says, I opened my laptop and returned to work, which happened to be writing the code for, yes, swarming drones, the exact technology that's depicted in the video. Chris Anderson says, I paused for a moment and Riley thought, I guess this is how that future happens, and then went right back to coding. What else could I have done? Choose not to write swarming code at all because it might someday kill us. But if I stopped writing the code, someone else would just do it instead, and I'd have to do something that was less interesting to work on. Should I write better code that was less likely to run amok? But I don't even know what that means. At this point, I'm lucky if the code works at all. But Chris didn't just stop there. He didn't punt on this issue of does he have some kind of ethical responsibility. He reached out to one of the key researchers of this scenario, Stuart Russell, the researcher of AI at UC Berkeley, who helped make the video and who has closed this scenario with a call to action, who runs the website autonomousweapons.org to try to raise awareness of this issue. So Chris Anderson wrote to this researcher and said, what should I, as a drone technology leader, do? And he had an answer. Stuart had an answer. He said, the answer is support a treaty banning lethal autonomous weapons. Cooperate in developing and complying with some kind of treaty mechanism that would be analogous to the Chemical Weapons Convention. Maybe support laws like Know Your Customer law that makes technology companies responsible for who they sell their technology to and how that technology is used. You can support notifications and checks for large-scale purchases that might indicate that they're intended to be used for some malevolent purpose so that you can prevent some kind of large-scale diversion of this technology for violence. And this was an amazing outcome for somebody who makes the technology to join conversation with somebody who researches the ethical implications of the technology. And together they were able to publicize and advocate for an epic win, to turn this incredibly dark, apocalyptic scenario into a community-scale solution in which everybody's working together to achieve collective benefit. That's what an epic win future looks like, when you can turn what's keeping you up at night into something that gets you out of bed in the morning, where you can feel hope and optimism that there are concrete things you can do to solve the problems, mitigate the risks, and do something that benefits all. That's an epic win. In the next video, I'm going to share with you some additional epic wins that have been generated out of future forecasting practices in the recent months, and then I will share with you some techniques to help you develop your own epic win. Earlier in this course, you had the chance to play with some pretty dark scenarios from the ethical operating system, scenarios that considered how new technologies might have runaway consequences and potentially harm our mental health or our privacy or security. The ethical operating system was designed to provoke conversation and foresight about unanticipated consequences of technologies. But one of the side effects of thinking about all of the ways that new technologies could go wrong is that you could just create more anxiety and dread for the future without helping people figure out, what are we supposed to do about this? You've convinced me that things could go wrong, but what do we do now? And we included in the ethical operating system a kind of epic win generating tool to make sure that people could move from that feeling of, I'm going to stay up at night worrying about this, to that feeling of, I'm jumping out of bed in the morning with energy and motivation to make this future better. So here are some of the epic wins that we proposed as possibilities that technology companies or universities or local governments might want to pursue. And any one of these epic wins could become the basis for a new way of anticipating and regulating technology. So I'll share with you these epic wins and then give you some practical techniques once you have generated the idea for an epic win, how to evaluate it and go about actually achieving it. So here's the first one, Tech Ethics 101. In this future, imagine that top computer science, design, and engineering programs adopt a requirement that all students complete a course or training sequence in tech ethics. As you design this epic win, you might need to answer questions like, what skills should this course teach? How would students be graded on their ethical skill set? Which schools might adopt this change first? Who would create the curriculum or textbook? And what could you do now to add into your daily routines that would reflect whatever principles are taught in our schools? Epic win number 2, a Hippocratic oath for data or tech workers. Imagine if anybody working in technology took an oath to do no harm, just the same way that doctors take the Hippocratic oath to first do no harm to patients. If you were pursuing this epic win, some questions you might ask would be, what specific commitments could this oath include? Could major technology companies or investors require individuals to take this oath as a condition of employment or a condition of funding? What rituals would make taking this oath more meaningful? What other specializations might create their own similar do no harm oath? How could this spread across society? Epic win number 3, ethical bounty hunters. What if tech companies began paying bounties for identifying the major social risks of new services and technologies? Similar to the way hackers are rewarded for identifying security flaws and vulnerabilities today, bounties could be set for different areas like mental health impact, risk to democracy, and structural racism, sexism, or other inequality. If you go after this epic win, you might answer questions like, how would someone claim a bounty? What kind of evidence would be required? Who within a company would be responsible for evaluating the risks that were identified and submitted? And what would a reasonable payout or bounty be? Epic win number 4, red flag rules. In this future, tech companies and investors provide employees at every level of the company with a list of social and ethical red flags to watch for. All employees will have clear pathways to report risks internally without fear of retribution. Questions to ask about designing and enacting this epic win might be, what risks should go on a red flag list? Who would create and update it? Would the list be shared across different companies? Would it be public or proprietary? What would an internal red flag reporting process look like? How would reports be handled on different teams? Epic win number 5, healthy platforms. In this future, creators of new technology platforms will be expected to establish and share a transparent measure of the health of their platform. For example, Twitter recently committed to measuring and maximizing 4 new measures of conversational health. Such health metrics will help evaluate whether the platform is doing good for its users and good for society. If you go after this epic win, you might ask questions like, what kind of health would you want to ensure? Healthy data ecosystems, healthy AI, healthy relationships. What would you define as important components of this health? How would you measure these components? How would you communicate health or health risks to users and or the public? And whose job would it be to monitor these metrics for health? And finally, epic win number 6, license to design. Imagine if all technology designers and developers were licensed by a governing body that regulates their actions, prohibits irresponsible or unethical design, and counteracts the prevailing move fast, break things culture of today's tech world. This would be similar to the licensing practices for doctors, lawyers, and architects today. Questions you might ask about going after this epic win: who would make up the governing body? What would requirements to obtain a license include? What actions would lead to loss of license? Would designers and developers benefit from this move to licensing? Would companies benefit? In what ways might they be harmed? How would you mitigate the potential negative repercussions of licensing? How might it affect inequality or less diversity in terms of who gets jobs, narrowing the job pool, or slowing innovation? So these are examples of epic wins that might sound like good ideas to some people, and other people might not want to pursue them. But once you have one that seems appealing or plausible to you, then you can really dig in. You can pick a strategy, you can pick an epic win, and you can consider its merits, what it could accomplish. You could consider its drawbacks. How could it go wrong? What might the unanticipated consequences be, or what would prevent it from becoming a reality? You can, in fact, use your positive and shadow imagination tools to draw out some aspects of the epic win before you commit to pursuing it. You could, in fact, use a futures wheel and try to play out some of the ripple effects or second order and third order consequences of pursuing this epic win. So you don't have to go blindly after a positive future. You can use all of the gaming tools that you've been practicing in this course to really investigate if the big solution, the big scalable benefit you want to go for is something that you feel can be achieved and will achieve that equitable future that you're going for. You've heard lots of examples of epic wins. Let's just drill down. If you're trying to design your own epic win, what are the key principles? How do you know that this could truly be an epic win? First of all, it's bigger than you. It's not just a goal for your company or your organization or your group. This is a win that would benefit all. So make sure you're thinking bigger than yourself, right? Second, it's scalable. We're talking about something that could be community-wide or a larger solution to a common problem. This is about a systemic level change or innovation that will affect as many people as possible. Third, an epic win is often rooted in a new best practice, a new policy, a rule or regulation, or some new kind of institution that doesn't exist yet, but a formal institution. And these are all things that help us change society at a societal level. You do need that kind of formal organization or that formal practice so that everybody can be affected equally and everybody can be guided equally. So there's a kind of formal aspect often to many of these epic wins. And finally, you know it's an epic win if it sparks you to action. And in fact, you're just about to start your last course in the Future Thinking Specialization, and that course is all about taking action, inspiring action, moving from these amazing ideas and these amazing insights into real change on the ground today. And you'll know that you have an epic win when you can start to imagine choices you would make, allies you would gather, resources you would create that are really changing the world today as you start to aim for that better future.
Hi, I'm Tessa Finlove, Research Director at Institute for the Future. I would like to introduce to you all the Equitable Futures card game. Please download it, print out the cards, and play by yourself, with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, with your students, whoever you'd like to talk about the future of equity with, and imagine possible solutions to building a more equitable world. We've designed the Equitable Futures card game to be very lightweight and accessible for anyone, anywhere, really. Use it to help kickstart some creative thinking around new possible solutions, products, services, or whole worlds that you want to develop that help us move towards a more equitable society. The card game is designed to be easy and accessible, a way to have an easy and sometimes fun conversation around a very challenging topic.
Ready to play the Equitable Futures card game? Here's how. Step 1. Print the card sheets. There are 4 types of cards. Challenges. What problems might we face in the future? Values. What common goods will we seek to create and protect in the future? Tools. What resources and technologies will we use to solve our challenges and to serve our values in the future? And personas. What different types of people will play an important role in making society better in the future? The game comes with 36 cards already filled out with examples of challenges, values, tools, and personas we think will be important in the future. There are also a dozen blank cards, so you can fill them out yourself and add the ideas you think are most important to consider for your future. When you're ready, cut out the cards and keep each type in a separate pile. Step 2, gather your players. You need at least 2 people to play the game. 3, 4, 5, or more players are even better. Step 3, each player picks a persona card. You can choose your own card or give them out randomly. Your persona is the role you will be playing in this game. Try to see the future from this person's point of view, whether it's a CEO of a major company, a young student, or a grandmother. Step 4, now that everyone has a persona, give out the rest of the cards. You can let players pick their own or give them out randomly. Make sure every player has at least one of each card type. Step 5. Now it's time to describe a possible future using the cards you've collected. Go around the table having players take turns putting down one card at a time. You're collectively building one prompt that will read, by 2030, we will have built a more equitable world by overcoming challenge. Society will be organized around value, and tool will be a commonplace tool for solving our challenges. If you have more than 3 players, subsequent players can replace any card already on the table with the same category card they might prefer. Step 6. Once the prompt is complete and all players have had a chance to place a card, set a timer for 10 minutes. Each player should spend this time writing a description of a possible future in which the challenge has been resolved, using the tool and respecting the value. Players can use their personas to influence the sort of possible solution they imagine. If your persona is an architect, for example, you'll want to think about the built environment. If your persona is a lawyer, you'll want to focus on new policies or laws. There are no wrong ideas or impossible futures. Challenge yourself to find something that isn't likely to happen without some effort and new innovations, something that's pushing the boundaries of what seems like it might already be happening. Step 7, each player reads their possibility aloud to the group. As a group, you can ask questions about each one and discuss which possibility you find the most exciting or promising. Most importantly, are there any actions you can commit to taking today to make the best possible future more likely? You'll find more tips and variations for playing this game in the Equitable Futures Toolkit. Have fun and good luck making a future that benefits all.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tessa.
Thanks for joining me in playing the Equitable Futures card game.
Thanks for having me.
It's going to be fun and challenging.
Great, let's play.
All right, so I'm going to pass out the persona card.
Great.
And I'm going to give you the farmer.
Perfect.
I'm going to choose the architect urban planner for myself. And I'm going to pass out just 2 of the tool cards and 2 of the challenge cards to each of us, and 2 of the value cards to each of us. Great. Now let's build our prompt, our scenario prompt.
Okay.
So Sarah, you can put down the first challenge card.
I'm going to choose violence against women.
All right. I will pick a tool card, which is robots. And now you can place a value card.
Let's focus on collaboration.
Great. So I would like to trade out a challenge card and place lack of clean water as a challenge.
That makes sense because I'm a farmer. I might also trade out one of the tool cards and think about how we would use public space instead of robots.
Okay. And value card, I think I'm good with collaboration.
Great, me too.
Okay, so now we play. We have our scenario prompt, which is, in 2030, we will have overcome the lack of clean water using public space, and collaboration is the organizing principle and value of society. So collaboration before competition. So now we live in this world. How have public space and collaboration come together in order to address lack of clean water?
Okay.
So I'm the architect. I'm going to imagine how an architect will have designed public space and collaboration to overcome lack of clean water.
And I'll do the same for a farmer.
Great.
And we're living in the same world together here. We're imagining
That's right.
this future together.
We're imagining the same future, two different personas, so multiple possible solutions to the same challenge.
Okay.
Would you like to share your new possibility with me?
Sure. So I was a farmer thinking about using public space with a value of collaboration to solve the challenge of a lack of clean water. And what I imagined doing was using the public space I was thinking about was people's front lawns or park spaces, anywhere that we currently grow grass. And right now that's often just kind of a lot of open green space that is not super productive, or isn't maybe the best use of that space. So I was imagining as farmers if there could be some collaboration between rural folks who have some of this knowledge about better land use practices and maybe urban folks who have some public space or some land that they could use, that they would start planting what are called perennial grains or perennial plants. And so annual plants have very shallow roots. They don't go very far down into the soil, and they don't hold a lot of water. But perennial plants are things that you plant once and they keep coming back every year. You don't have to dig them up and replant them. And that means that their roots go much, much deeper into the ground. And they require much less water to grow, so they're much better in drought scenarios. But they also help build up the health of the soil, which makes it better able to retain water, makes us all around just more drought resistant and more efficient with our water use. And so the scenario that I was imagining here was that people are using the gray water from their house, which means the leftovers from when you were washing your dishes or taking a shower. This is water that you couldn't drink, but is still useful for many purposes. There's ways to kind of easily filter your gray water and use it for other purposes. So here we're using gray water from domestic households, and we're having that be run off into using front yards or other urban public spaces to create perennial grasslands or perennial food sources, which could serve to both increase availability of water and maybe an extra bonus of making a food source at the same time.
And regenerate groundwater?
Yes, so you'd be able to, over time, build up the groundwater, which, at least in California recently, we've been having to tap into and drain a lot of the groundwater that's built up for many, many hundreds and thousands of years because of how much water we've been needing to use to grow food.
I like it. So this is playing the long game. Dealing with lack of clean water by creating more responsible water use systems. So there's more water generally.
And it was fun to think about it in terms of public spaces, because I think maybe we often would think about ways that farmers could do this on their land, but by being forced to use the public space tool, I thought about different places where we might implement that strategy.
Nice.
What'd you do?
So I was the architect or urban planner, which is convenient because I got to think about public space as an architect or urban planner, what I would do with it. So I was thinking, and I was inspired by what I've seen in Sudan, which is a very hot, very dry place. When you walk around in the capital, there are these like clay pots, like this big, just in random places, with a board on top and a cup, and anyone just goes up, it's drinking water. So there's that, like, it's just naturally occurring, right? There's no like system in place. It's just what people do, and it's clean and it's safe, and that's like collaboration at its peak. So I was thinking, if I was an architect or urban planner, I would design a system where every town or village has a public space. So I guess we could just use any square public space that already exists, And all of those should have either a rain catchment system, a desalination system if they're by the ocean, or atmospheric water generator, basically the technology to capture drinking water out of dry air. And that water should be free, publicly available to anybody who needs a clean drink of water.
So this is just building the actual infrastructure for people to be able to access that water that might already be there elsewhere.
Yeah, both access the water, so that's the public space and the collaboration. You don't have to like do anything to get it. You just, if you need it, you go get it. And then also, obviously, desalination and harvesting water from the air. Those are cutting edge technologies that are pretty inefficient. But in 10 years, 15 years time, those technologies may be way more efficient, and so we should be using those in public spaces to create access to clean water.
Cool.
Let's go do it. We got 2 new businesses ready to go, social entrepreneurship businesses. Okay, thanks for playing with me, Sarah.
Thanks for inviting me to play, Tessa. That was fun.
And don't forget to download the Equitable Futures Toolkit. Print out these Equitable Future card game cards and play the game by yourself, with your family, with your kids, with your students, with your colleagues, and help us imagine more equitable futures.
Congratulations, you have successfully gamed the future. More importantly, you know why the future is like a game. The future is like a game because we have to play it to find out what happens, and we can play it before it happens so we can develop more creative strategies and recruit more allies and go for epic wins together. The future is like a game because there are more possible outcomes than there are atoms in the universe, and every move we make today, every decision we make today, it affects what possibilities remain. And that's why we draw out consequences. We draw out consequences, we use our positive and shadow imagination so that we can start to take and shape the infinite possibilities and bring them into closer vision. We can see the future we want to make. And the future is better when it's a massively multiplayer game, when you invite as many people as possible to the table to share their points of view, to share their creative strategies, to share their goals. The more people you invite into your Foresight practices, the more empathy you'll develop for the full range of how futures might affect different people differently, and you're less likely to be blindsided when it turns out that a lot of people really want that future and they're going to work hard to make it real. Or you won't be blindsided to find out that nobody wants this future and they're going to do everything possible to stop it from happening. The more people you invite into your Foresight practices, the more likely you are to come up with an epic win that truly does create a future that benefits all. So congratulations on getting this far in your futures thinking training. There's just one more step to take. We're going to take that step together in the next course, where we're going to turn our foresight into urgent optimism and figure out all of the ways we can take action today to shape the future tomorrow. I will see you in course number 5.